Alright, boys and girls, it's time to look at chord voicing, but not just in a traditional sense, but how to voice bigger chords. Which notes to double, which notes to not double that much, and so on. And this is super crucial to getting that clean, pure, big, balanced orchestral sound in your recordings and not just end up in some unbalanced, muddy mess. So let's just dive right into it and have a look at this little C major chord, completely normal. So this kind of resembles the kind of chords we have been looking at so far in the course. Just a standard chord with, a bass and then a triad on top. Nothing more, nothing less really. But say you want like a bigger chord, like a either big orchestral statement or a hit, with all the instruments playing one chord quickly or something like that. But let's say you want a bigger orchestral statement, like a big orchestral chord or, something like that. And you want a chord that's more like this. Let's just take it up a little bit here. Something like that. Now, if you want to do that, there are some pretty important guidelines to follow to not make it end up sounding more like this. You can argue how bad this is really, but let's listen to just the clarity and the balance of these chords. Difference. This is a, nice, clean, vibrant C major chord, like a big C major chord. This is more like a muddy, unclear, weird thing. So let's look at these ones side by side and see the difference here, because we're going to orchestrate this now for, a bigger ensemble and see how that affects the sound, in an orchestrated way. But let's look at some very important guidelines. First of all, when it comes to voicing in bigger chords, there is one rule of thumb that's super important, and that is open spacings in the low end in the bottom and tighter spacings in the top. And that's what you see I have been doing here in the balanced nice chord. It's a whole octave you see in the lowest part of the chord here. It's a fifth up to the next one. Then you have the root again. You see it's very open here. There's not a lot going on, but then it gets closer and tighter as we get higher up in the range, in the pitches here. While in the muddy one, you can see there's a lot of closed spacings in the low end, but more open in the high end, which is like the opposite of what we really want optimally. So one way to make this chord more clear is to open up the spacings in the bottom here. If I take this and let's say that, and just take it up a few octaves. This one too maybe, just delete it all together so we have a closer voicing in the top and, less close voicing in the bottom. Let me also just take away this. We're already probably going to have a better result. You see, now it sounds a lot more open and balanced than it did in this position. Right? Okay, so that's fundamental number one. Close voicings in the top and open ones in the bottom. And this is because the overtones that these notes create, if you have a lot of them in the low end, all the overtones that they combine together are gonna crash and they're gonna create this mud that you can hear here. Versus this. Alright, we got that now. Then let's head over to the next important principle, and that is the doubling of the notes in your chord. So as a rule of thumb, you shouldn't just, double any note in this chord just, as far as it goes. You're not just doing this and, Control C, paste and one octave up and then, pasting it another octave up. That's not really the way you usually go about it, because there's a certain, again, rule of thumb to which notes to double and which ones not to double that much. And it goes like this. First and foremost, you want to double the root note. This is a very safe bet. The root note is very balanced, and you can just stack it on top of each other, like as many times as you want. I have 4 octaves in this chord. And I mean, yeah, 4 octaves of the root note here. So that's definitely the most common note in my chord here. Let's see, C, 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 C. Actually, there's like 5 C's in this one. So most of it is just C's. I probably wouldn't have needed 5 of them, but in general, the root note is the one you want to double the most. After that, what you want to double the second most is the 5th. And that's what I've been doing here as well. I've been adding the 5th here. See, here as well, we have a 5th in the G, and we have another 5th. So I have 3 5ths as well, as you can see. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 2 5ths in here, as you can see. We have it over here, and I think we have it right there. So, that said, I mean, you can guess which ones are left after that. We have the 5th, we have the roots, 5th, root, and root, right? I'm sorry, I mean 5th and root on the bottom. So you can see what's left here. It's an E, which is a major third in the chord of C major. So we have only 1, which leads me to the 3rd, which should be doubled the least out of the 3 main ones. Because this one has a bit of tension. The 3rd has a bit of tension. If you double too many 3rds, it's just not going to sound that good. It's going to be an unbalanced chord, and this is one of the most common orchestration mistakes beginners usually make, is that there's too many 3rds in their chords. So I only used 1/3 here in a chord with 9 or so notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 of them is a 3rd. 5 of them is a root, and 2 of them is a 5th. I could probably distribute it a bit better, but I mean, over exaggerating these things just to, show you the principle. Now, let's look at the, quote unquote bad example. Let's see how many root notes we have here. We have 1, we have a C here, we have a C here, where's nothing. And yeah, we have only 2 root notes, and they are all over here. Right. So that's bad. When only 2 out of 8 or so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in this case. When 2 out of 9 notes into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When 2 out of 9 notes in a chord is a root, it's not going to be too balanced because you need to really establish this root to make the chord sound balanced and grounded in a way. Now let's see how many 5ths we have, which should be, less than this, and it can't be just mathematically right now, probably. We have 1 here, which is a G. We have another here, another G. Then we have a 3rd G over here, and actually a 5th G. So we have 4 different 5ths in this chord, which is twice as many as the root, which is clearly not following the rule of thumb we just talked about. And finally, we have a 3rd. We have another 3rd here, another 3rd. So we have more 3rds than we have roots, which is clearly not what we want. That's going to result in a very unbalanced sound. So the combination of too many 3rds and too many 5ths compared to almost no root notes, combined with a very narrow voicing in the low end, is going to give us an unbalanced sound like this. Alright, so we get those principles now. After this, you probably... let's look at this in an orchestral perspective. Let's listen to this chord. Alright, it's a chord, but, I mean, listen to it again. Do you feel it sounds balanced and full and rich? doesn't sound too bad, but listen to this as a comparison. Sounds a little bit more balanced and rich and clean. Now let's listen to or look at the voicings here. And again, you see it's the same chords that I've been using twice here. The first one sounds a little bit muddy and a bit hard to define, while this one sounds a bit more balanced. And it's the same voicings going on, I just copied the piano chords and just spread them out for the orchestra with some strings and some brass. But I hope this kind of, gives you look into why you want to space things out in the bottom, keep things closer on the top, and mostly double the root notes. Now, that said, this does not only apply to actual chords you're spacing out throughout the orchestra. This also applies to your general main elements in the arrangement of these elements. For example, if you have 4 elements, you have a harmony, you have a counter melody, melody, and ostinato. You would also like those elements to follow this kind of guideline. You would want to follow this kind of structure with the basses down low. You have maybe some chords on top of that. And then as you get higher up, you might have the melody and the counter melody a bit closer. And then let's say the ostinato on top of that again. That might be a good way to do it. But what you don't want is to have like the basses down here, the melody down here, the harmony down here, the ostinato like here, and something else like, also very low. Because all those things is going to clash. You want some things to be on the bottom with a lot of space to the next element, a bit less space to the next element, a little bit less space to the next element, and so on. So you want to kind of mimic this kind of spacing for everything you do in terms of orchestration and arranging. Now, on the earlier example of this, some people said that they actually preferred the sound of the closed, like low, deep voicing because it sounds kind of like this Inception big Brahm with a brass instruments. And for those people, I added a little extra chord here in the ending to also show you how you can achieve these kind of low, really brutal chords without messing up the chord voicings too much. You can still follow these principles and get these really low, nasty chords. At the same time, sometimes you want this low spacing, this really closed low spacing, because it gives a muddy and kind of, brutal effect. And that might be something you desire sometimes. So, all rules are there to be broken when, you want to get something out of breaking that rule. But in general, try to follow these principles. Let's head into that final little chord I think I made here. Yes, there we go. So here we have a little chord, and I'm just going to play it to you, and you'll see what I mean. So this is obviously not like super well produced, I just play the chords, but let's just look at how they are voiced. You can see here again, I have an octave, and then we have a tighter spacing up top, even though the entire chord is fairly, in a low range. But I still use the same principles, and the chords sound fairly clean. And as we talked about earlier, when doubling, just double down on these things. You can just make things sound bigger and bigger, but doubling the same elements with the different doubling and spacing principles in mind. So I hope this has been a helpful video when it comes to voicing bigger chords and making your mixes and orchestration sound more clean and balanced. Let's head over to the next video, and I'll see you guys there.